I remind people that this is a telepathic, it's a mind to mind
Yeah.
communication. It's not me looking at them and reading their body language.
And we're live. And this week we have somebody who I really wish I had a pet for this particular interview so that you could communicate with it. But you are Maribeth Decker and you're an intuitive animal communicator. And it's actually your story is fascinating. So can we start off with just say like what you do as a living and how you started off realizing you could talk to animals?
Okay, that's a great way to start, Tim.
Yeah,
Because it's for me, the story never gets old.
yeah,
I was not, as far as I know, I was not born an intuitive animal communicator. And
yeah,
what we said before we started this, it's telepathy. It's a mind to mind
yeah,
communication, and I do that. I also do medical intuition, and that includes finding out how they're feeling physically, and sometimes it includes how they're feeling emotionally. Because I don't know if you've ever felt anxiety.
yeah,
I don't think the word anxiety. I feel it, and so I can feel that in my own body and give people information. So I can help people have two-way conversations between them and their animal. I'm kind of like the interpreter,
yeah.
if you can say it that way. And then also some energy healing, which can always be helpful when there's emotions involved behind some of the um, some of the things that animals are doing that probably cause us worry and concern. So that's quickly in a nutshell what I do. And the most interesting part for me is as I said, I didn't start from the womb
Yeah,
connecting, and I know people who have very young. It, it actually happened when I completed two careers or almost completed the second one, and I decided to start learning energy healing.
yeah,
I became a Reiki master and took some other courses, and my dogs started communicating with me. I didn't have it on my to-do list. They talked about the bucket list. There was nothing about that happening for me. Um, and what was most delightful, I think, for anybody who's lost a pet or a beloved animal companion of any sort, is they had passed on. My first guy, Timmy,
yeah,
um, I was in the kitchen cooking probably a terrible dinner for my kids. Bad cook. And out of this corner of my eye, I saw Timmy sitting on the floor. And what blew me away was it's as if he was really there. Not the ghost like guys, you see kind of amorphous shaped, you can see through them. No, it looked like this guy was sitting there looking at me, grinning. And I whip my head and I go, Timmy, what the? And he's gone.
yeah,
But in that moment, I knew he survived the death of his body. He's still here. He looked completely like who he was in life. He was happy, and he came back to let me know he was okay. I mean,
yeah,
talk about gifts in a few seconds. So that got me started, and more things happened with my animals. And then I'm looking at my pictures of my dogs over here.
yeah,
Those who are still on the planet, I started hearing from them as well. And I finally said, when I had a rescue dog and I was seeing some really strange things, uh, I don't know what this is. And my friend said, that's animal communication, Mary Beth. And I go, really? That's a thing? And so I got training to do it on purpose. And, you know, these days, having animals in the family, most of us see them, at least in my life here. I've seen them become family members. My joke is I used to my my husband's grandfather used to have beagles in the backyard,
Yeah.
and now I wake up to 2 dogs and sometimes 2 cats in the bed. That's the way things have changed
Yeah.
in a relationship. So I wanna improve relationships, by conversing with animals and, getting a better understanding and maybe helping change behaviors or mindsets, either with the animals or the humans, whatever it takes.
Okay. So
Okay.
how, like, do you ever have a problem? Like, my, I've got so many questions I could ask, but like, when you're walking along the street somewhere, do you accidentally communicate with animals, or is it something that you have to kind of focus to actually talk to a particular animal, or like, how does it work in kind of like if you're working with a client, like, how does the communication work?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different things. The first thing I wanna say is I believe that we're all intuitive,
Yeah,
and so for different people, we experience it differently. For me, at this point, I have a lot of fun because usually if I'm out walking my dogs, um, I'll get an eye-to-eye contact with them, and sometimes, I mean, we'll say, "Hello, how are you? So glad to see you," just through a quick, eye
yeah,
contact. I don't go deeply, into it, and sometimes I've had conversations with squirrels and foxes and things like that. Um, the funniest one is I have a very barky little dog who she would like to catch every squirrel in the neighborhood,
yeah,
and, so she starts doing the barks, and I say, "Okay, that's enough. Leave the squirrel alone." The squirrel ru and I say to the squirrel, "It'd be a great idea if you ran up the tree. That's a really good idea." So it runs up, it hides behind the tree, but then it comes back and it looks at me and looks at her, and I hear it say, "Oh, I've heard about that dog." It's like the squirrel community has talked about Mally and said, "You gotta move." And she's, "Yeah, that is a barky dog." So things like that can happen. Um, but when I'm doing this on purpose, then I take a little time to do the connection, uh, so it becomes purposeful.
yeah.
So there's a little bit of both, and some people are better at just picking things up quickly and easily, even without focusing.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned that you had training to become an animal communicator. So
Yeah,
was that somebody who was just intuitive in general, or is there like a guild of animal communicators out there that I don't know about?
there are
Secret community
these
you
days.
have?
Good question. There are a bunch of animal communicators out there, and yes, I trained with somebody whose specialty is teaching people to be animal communicators. She started teaching us, and so it was great. There were the basics, but a lot of it was practice
Yeah.
and then getting feedback. So you start to trust your own abilities. And that was really, really good. That was so useful.
And
And I teach it, I teach it too,
yeah,
um, because I'd love people to be able to connect with their own animals.
yeah, I can
I thought
imagine.
that would be, yeah.
Okay, so what was I gonna? I had a great question and it's just gone out of my mind. So oh yeah, is there like, do you find that different types of animals have different kind of personalities? I mean, obviously, a squirrel has a very different worldview to a dog and a pet, and a wild animal will be different to a pet. Do different kind of animals have different kinds of default personalities? And like, do you find that the intelligence level? I mean, obviously, if you're talking to, I don't know, a bird, it might be different to talking to a Great Dane or something. Are there different personalities and intelligence levels amongst the animals that you talk to?
I've come to believe that species wise, there's certainly a way of seeing the world, like
Yeah,
what's important and all that. But when you're talking to individuals, you're talking to personalities just like when you talk to humans,
yeah,
you know. Yeah, do humans have a certain personality? I don't know if we could bring that down. And there's a lot more intelligence in the animal community than we've given them credit for. Luckily, science is coming up and they're talking even about fish having families and knowing people and communicating. And we used to think fish were
yeah,
dumber than a rock, if I may say that.
yeah,
And so I'm finding out it's not, and I've met birds who have wonderful, interesting personalities. Um, some are curmudgeons, some are not. So I don't go in with a belief system that says, well, this I'm going to get this from this animal.
yeah,
Uh, I think the hardest part right here that comes to mind is people who are dog lovers um, look at cats, and cats are have a different way of interacting with
yeah,
us many times. And if you expect your cat to be a dog, you're going to miss out on a lot of
yeah,
the, the good things that they bring to the relationship. That's and if you're willing to go deeper with them, you can always find some good communication and love from cats as well as dogs. That's kind of my soapbox right now.
yeah. Okay, so let's say I had a pet. I haven't got a pet, but let's say I had a dog and I wanted
Yeah,
to work with you. How does that work? I know you do virtual sessions as well, but
I
like,
do.
do you prefer in person or can you do it remotely? How does it work, and how would that interaction work? Let's say I had this dog that had some sort of kept
Yeah.
crapping on the landing or something. I don't know, had some sort of issue that I wanted to solve. So how would that session work?
Well, I like that question because I remind people that this is a telepathic, it's a mind to mind
Yeah,
communication. Yeah. It's not me looking at them and reading their body language. So most of my sessions are virtual. I do
yeah,
some in person, and I mean the most interesting one I had was I'm in Virginia in the USA. The dog is with the the person's dog is living with the aunt and uncle in Canada, and the person is, I think at this time, last time I connected was in Thailand.
yeah,
And so, of course, we're on Zoom, but there's no problem making the connection and then explaining to the person what I'm receiving. So, um, did that make sense? Did it?
yeah. No, I mean it's like so. How do you initiate that connect? How do you know you're connecting to that animal and not a different
Okay.
animal nearby? I mean,
Okay.
like, do you need a photo? What is there some way that you can sort of grab onto that animal to talk?
Yeah, yeah. I love a photo. A name helps, but a photo really helps. And I imagine because intuition feels like imagination.
Yeah,
So when you get over that, you're on your way to picking things up. I imagine that as I look at the photo, that I'm connecting with them and saying, "It's Mary Beth here." Um, and for me, I just get a certain sense right here, uh, like we're connecting, and from there I can keep going. And then I usually ask a question, probably from what the person says that's worrying them. Like, are they are they doing okay? Like the lady who was in Thailand is. Did you want to travel with me?
yeah,
Or are you happy still being with aunt and uncle by the lake? And so the question I would ask her dog, and the dog was happy to be where they were.
yeah,
And it co- it's not always a conversation. It's sometimes I get a feeling and I see them doing something that tells me what the answer is.
yeah. And it's and coming to your book as well, because that's kind of
Yeah.
like you've got a book, but your book is about it's a lot to do with animals that passed on. Uh,
Yeah.
so is that a different kind of is that a different skill to contacting like living animals, or is that just an extension of it?
It feels more like an extension of it. And um I started out with my book to talk about the very end and the transition because it's a really difficult thing for most of us these
Yeah,
days. And I also talk about helping people when they find out that for real there's going to be an end point to their animal's life. Like we all know it, but when you get a diagnosis that doesn't look
yeah,
good or you see them slowing down, I started writing about that because there was so much grief started at that point. And it seems to me that there's not a lot of difference overall um, in the connecting part, but sometimes what we'll notice is, I hope I say this in a way that makes sense. There's like if they were a dog, there's less of the doggy aspect and more of the soul coming through. Like there's a bigger understanding sometimes. So when that happens, sometimes we can understand better why they left when they left. If there was an accident or something happened, usually can hear that afterwards. Um, and they'll have a more spiritual aspect to them, if that's a way to say it. Not just the dog, dog. This is what I love, but there's more going on. Like they're a little bit more aware
yeah,
of things.
yeah. Closing the door because there's somebody ringing the phone here, but it hopefully comes.
Yeah, here's your
Um, right. Well, what am I going to ask? I'm needing my like intuitive. What is the smallest animal that you would attempt to communicate? If somebody had like a pet beetle or something, I mean, are insects something? Have you ever communicated with insects, or like what's the smallest thing you communicated with?
I, I I have to admit that I communicated with the ants in my backyard
Oh, okay.
one time um, to just ask them to stay outside the house, and I imagine that I was talking to the queen ant
Yeah,
and saying, you want to keep your workers safe and everything, keep them in the house.
yeah,
Um, Gave a little bit of a gift or something way away from the house. I feel like I connected in some way, but animals have free will. So sometimes I've gotten no's and we still see ants in the house, but I did connect. I did connect. And I have felt butterflies and, uh, oh, yeah. Some of the flying things like beetles, you can get a kind of a feeling for it. Um, it's usually not really deep for me, but I do feel like there's like they know that I'm sending information to them.
yeah.
Let me just say that.
So I'm guessing that your attitude towards animals and the world in general has been transformed since you become an intuitive communicator with animals. Is that? I'm guessing that's
That is true.
yeah,
That is true. I when you see how many species are sentient, intelligent, feel love, feel worry, feel grief.
yeah,
Uh, I've well, that's probably that is why I became a vegetarian, working on vegan. But just feeling like more thoughtful about their lives, uh, because there is that intelligence. I just can't see them the same way as I used to growing up.
Yeah.
Um, and I even feel like they're out there trying to bring us back into the fold of being part of nature and seeing the value. I have a I have a story that came to me. It feels like a parable or something like that, or just a fable. That I'd love to share it if I could.
Go ahead if you think it's right.
But okay, good.
Well, as long as it's
It's a
not
lot of
2 hours long, but it's like if it's
yeah. No, no, I think we can do this in a couple minutes.
yeah,
So, all there was some kind of a convention of all the animal species, and they all got around and they said, "These humans, they are out of control. I don't know where we're going to end up." And they're like, "What do we do?" And then they look at the cats and the dogs and the birds and the horses and some of the rabbits and say, "You guys, you go inside, and I want you to start changing their minds about who we are, who the non-humans are, and you are the point animals. You get in there and you teach them about love for other species,
yeah,
and respect, and maybe it'll start to fall. It'll start to wave out like a ripple to the rest of us who are trying to live on the planet." And the dogs and the cats and the horses go, "Okay, we can do that." And that's that's sort of
yeah.
what their mission is, to get us to open our minds and hearts to all species on the planet.
Okay. And from your work as an animal communicator, is that your primary job now, or do you do other things as well? But what would you say is the biggest success story you've had, like in terms of helping somebody with their animals?
Oh, oh, that there's a lot of good ones. Uh, some things seem small, but when you think about them, they're really big. There,
Yeah,
there was somebody who took my class, and she was really seriously thinking about rehoming her little dog because he was just too much.
yeah,
And through the animal communication, she was able to start to communicate with him in a way that they've figured out a good relationship, and she's keeping the guy. Um, that's a small example, but it's just so big these days where people just give up on their pets, you know.
yeah,
And now he gets to live with a really wonderful human being and enjoy his life and relax into it because of that.
yeah. Okay. And
Yeah.
if somebody's watching this either live now
Yeah.
or in the future when it finally gets onto YouTube and wherever else, and they think that they might be a little bit animal intuitive, like
Yeah.
um, what should they be looking out for? And if they feel that, what are the next steps? And should they get in touch with you, or should they find like is there a great master animal communicator in Tibet they should go and visit? How does the process work?
Well, start looking for knowings. That seems to be the thing that most of us who don't claim to be, intuitive animal communicators, sometimes we just know things, and then we find out that we were right. The simple example that I've heard and I've experienced back in the day is dogs in the backyard, and all of a sudden you just know they want to come in,
Yeah,
or you're someplace else and they're inside and they want to go out, and you look and they're like, "Yes, thank you. I've been broadcasting this to you for ages. Thank you for listening." Um, so notice those times of intuition, and you can even practice asking a question and seeing what comes through. and it can come through as a picture in your mind, a word, a feeling that you get in your body. And when you get it, look at them and say, "Thanks, I'll take more of that," and
Yeah.
see where it goes. Practice a little bit, um, and try telling them something. Cats are pretty good at this.
Yeah.
Like, you can invite cats into your bed at night and say, "It's time for bed. Come on."
Yeah.
See if you get something happening in the real world. There are great teachers out there. I do teach my You Connect class twice a year, spring and fall, and it's on Zoom. It's live, and so I would love to work with people, even if they don't want to be professional animal communicators, so that they can connect to their own animals and other animals they meet.
Yeah. And is it easier to talk to an animal that your own pet than it is to just some random animal out, out somewhere else?
Yeah, sometimes that's true. Sometimes when you have a lot of emotion about it, the emotion gets in the way,
Oh, okay.
and ones that you don't. So depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Um, Tim, it really does. It's interesting.
Yeah. So sometimes people could potentially talk to other animals before they could overcome the emotion of the
Absolutely,
partner.
absolutely.
I suppose that's kind of like relationships in general, though, isn't it?
It is
Yeah.
perfect analogy.
Yeah. Okay. So how can people uh, get in touch with you if they want to, like, book a communication session, and also talk a little bit about your book and who that can help?
Okay, so the best way to get in touch with me is through my website, sacredgrove.com.
Yeah.
There's a place, you can find out about what I do and see what would work best for you, and that you can actually book a session from there. And my book, Peace and Passing: Comfort for Loving Humans During Animal Transitions. I want to help people find peace after their animals have left the planet, because I I haven't talked to every human that loves their animal, but a lot of times we're always left with grief, but we're also left with a remorse, and um, beating ourselves up. Did I keep them too long? Were they suffering and they wanted to transition? Did I shorten their life too much? Did they want to stick around a little longer? And people on top of the grief, they have the sense of guilt going on. So I wrote the book so that when animals start to slow down or things start to happen, you can find out some great mindsets about how to be there with them and enjoy them, and then even and help them enjoy their time with you as well, rather than spending your time in mourning about what will happen. Um, we can't stop that. We're human, but
Yeah.
if we can focus again that they're still here, that's really helpful. And I talk about alternative therapies now. Like, my little cat Bunny goes for acupuncture
Oh.
because she's getting her back ends not doing so well. There's some pain and arthritis, and hey, if that cat can walk around and jump and feel good,
Mm.
she's going to enjoy life more. And there's other therapies now that we only thought were for humans that we're now doing for animals. So I give some ideas on how to make even the last part of their life as comfortable for them as we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So it kind of sounds like a useful book, especially for people. I mean, it's not just for people who've lost a pet; it's also for people who are potentially worried about it.
Yeah, yeah. And the other part that I really love is a lot of folks that I've worked with. I asked them if we could put their stories in there. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of stories from people real people and their pets. So there's a lot of joy
Yeah,
and laughter in there about how they got through this. So yeah, it's through from the whole starting of the end through and after the transition.
yeah. And you, as
Yeah.
we said earlier, you also do like one-to-one sessions with people, which can be anywhere in the
I
world
do.
potentially. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
It's funny, as long as the human speaks English, I don't need the animal to speak English. We can connect somehow.
oh,
But as long as the human speaks English, I'm good.
yeah, that's interesting. Like,
Yeah.
how? Well, I mean, even if I presume even if the human couldn't speak English, but they could translate somehow. Is it like, or is
Huh,
it a
I
link
hadn't thought
between
of
the
that.
human and the animal?
Yeah.
I suppose it,
Um,
or is it just the case that you're not really speaking a language per se? You're more just concepts and thoughts that you're communicating.
well, it's a okay. Good another good one. You know when generally those that live with us do understand the language that's being spoken to them.
Yeah,
When I'm talking and I'm thinking in English, s- I'm setting the intention that I am sending information, as you said, as more as maybe maybe pictures, the the emotion of questions. Like there's a like a I'm going like which is like you create a like what do you think, and then there's a picture that goes, and then you listen for what comes back, uh, and sometimes it comes in as a word, and that's my brain figuring it out. And a lot of times more pictures, especially if there's a language difference, and that works
yeah.
too.
So you don't suddenly go on holiday to Mexico and find all the animals are talking Spanish. It's like Doctor Doolittle or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They're communicating energetically, and so
yeah,
the communication can be so many different ways: physically,
yeah,
um, visuals,
yeah.
all that stuff.
And I mean, have you experienced some animals that you just can't talk to at all? I mean, are there some cases where you just have to say, "I'm sorry for whatever reason, I can't," or is that just because the animal doesn't want to communicate, or are there some that you can't communicate with?
Yeah, I've met a few. A lot of times, I did meet one when I was still practicing, and when I connected with him, he was literally in a kind of a dog fashion, crossing his
For
hands over his chest and with his back facing me, like I ain't talking to you.
mm,
And I said, okay, well, I got nowhere to go, and finally he turned around and said, all right, fine, what do you want? So sometimes a little patience helps. Others, um, when that has happened, and it hasn't been often, um, they're just not ready, and you can't force it.
yeah,
But that doesn't happen very often. They're like, yeah, let's do this. This is cool.
yeah. Okay, well, that's nice to hear. That's kind of nice.
Yeah.
There is a universal sort of animal language communication thing. Well, most of us are all totally oblivious to. So. Anyway, thank you so much for being the guest today. And yeah, I normally would ask like how to get in touch with you and everything, but you've already said that. It's Sacred Grove is your website. Is it www.sacredgrove.com or .co? Well,
It's just the H now these days it's the
yeah,
HTTPS, colon
say
slash
yeah.
sacredgrove.com.
Okay, it's .com. That's quite
Yeah.
good. Okay, well, thanks so much for being on the show, and thanks for everybody who's watched this show live and everybody who's watching it in the future. So, thanks to all the future people as well, and thanks so much for being the guest today, Maribeth.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
this is what God requires.
And I pitched it as a series where the intern goes across Canada by train, and she let me do it, which was
Ooh, yeah,
absolutely nuts. And she was amazing for letting me do that. And that is how I ended up going on my first solo trip, because I got this ticket and I thought I can't miss the opportunity. And before that, I had never even once thought about traveling solo.
yeah.
That never even occurred to me that that was a thing.